Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to episode 1 of the Jonathan Hunn podcast, brought to you by the New Patriots. In episode 1, I am going to teach you about what I call the hidden war. The war between actual Americans and a hidden Confederate oligarchy that seeks to destroy it. So, my fellow Americans, strap in, get comfortable, and let's get into it.
That we here highly resolve that these dead shall not have died in vain. That this nation under God shall have a new birth for freedom. And that government of the people, by the people, for the people, shall not perish from the earth.
Every nation has a soul. And America's soul has been at war with itself since before it was even born. Not North versus South, not left versus right, but the America that believes in its ideals versus the one that's been fighting them from the start. So before we talk about politics or parties or headlines, I want to teach you 3 terms that I made up. But I think these 3 keys will explain everything that's been happening in this country since before 1776. This is number 1, AICO, Anti-American Confederate Oligarch. Number 2, AICO, American in Citizenship Only. And MAFO, Make America America for Once. If you understand these 3, you'll finally see our history clearly. Because this has never been a battle between Americans. It's been a battle between America and its imitators. So let's talk about the birth of 2 Americas. Before there was a United States, there was an idea. In the 1600s and 1700s, Europe was having an awakening. People were starting to believe that truth didn't belong to kings or popes exclusively, that every human could reason, observe, and think for themselves. It started with the Protestant Reformation, and Martin Luther said, "You don't need a priest to talk to God." That single shift, that people could seek truth directly, changed the world. A century later, Francis Bacon and John Locke took that idea and turned it outward. They said, if God gave us reason, then discovering truth through evidence, through observation, was a form of worship. That's where the scientific method was born. The Enlightenment era was not an attack on faith. It was faith maturing, learning that if God gave you a mind, you were meant to use it. That's the soil America grew out of. Our nation wasn't founded as a church or a tribe. It was founded as a philosophy, a living experiment in reason, freedom, and a moral evolution. That's why the founders built in amendments, not because they were unsure, but because they knew we would grow. They wanted progress written into the Constitution itself, and to make sure no one ever twisted that intent, they left us this line in the Treaty of Tripoli in 1797, signed by John Adams and ratified unanimously by the Senate. And I quote, "The government of the United States is not in any sense founded on the Christian religion." Read that again. Not against religion, just not founded on it. America was meant to be a great philosophical republic, not a theocracy or a racial empire. That's the America the founders imagined, the one built for all thinkers, all seekers, and all people. But here's where the war begins, inside their own minds. The founders were complicated, smart, but they were also flawed humans. They were building the world's first modern democracy in a world still ruled by kings and had slaves. So yes, they compromised. They argued. They were trapped between their ideals and their economy. But here's what most people don't realize. They knew it, and they were careful. They could have written a constitution that said slave or property or white. They didn't. Instead, they wrote persons with a capital P. The same word they used to describe themselves, they described the enslaved. That was no accident. It was their way of leaving the door open for the future. The 1808 clause banning the importation of enslaved people was not a defense of slavery. It was a countdown to its extinction. They built a fuse into the system because they knew the future would light it. Governor Morris, one of the loudest voices at the convention, called slavery, and I quote, a nefarious institution, a curse of heaven. John Adams never owned a slave and said slavery was, quote, an evil of colossal magnitude. Benjamin Franklin freed his slaves and later led the first abolitionist society in America. Alexander Hamilton called for the enlistment and emancipation of black soldiers during the Revolution. Yes, there were black soldiers during the Revolution. We've been here the entire time. So no, the founders didn't imagine America as a white nation. They imagined it as a human one. And they wrote ideals bigger than themselves. When they began the Constitution with "we the people," they didn't mean we the perfect. They meant we the evolving. They didn't finish the work. They could have. But they left the door open. They left it to us because they knew America wasn't a statue. It was a staircase. But as one America wrote words about liberty, another America was writing checks off human bondage. A small group of Southern oligarchs, the original anti-American Confederate oligarchs, they wanted a nation where democracy stopped at the plantation gate. They didn't want freedom. They wanted control. They built their own religion to justify it. A version of Christianity that sanctified cruelty and hierarchy. They said God ordained slavery. They said rebellion against them was a rebellion against heaven itself. They created a false faith to defend a false freedom. When the Constitution banned the slave trade in 1808, they didn't repent. They doubled down. They expanded west, bought more land, bought more bodies, consolidated power. And when Lincoln tried to pull the country back toward its founding ideals, they chose treason over unity. The Civil War wasn't just a conflict over territory. It was a spiritual one. The America of we the people versus the America of we the profitable. And when they lost, they didn't surrender. They shapeshifted. They put on new clothes, sheriffs instead of soldiers, laws instead of chains, and pulpits instead of plantations. That's how the Confederate mindset survived all this time. After the Civil War, the AICOs learned something. They didn't need whips to control people, just stories. They built myths. The cowboy, the self-made man, the silent majority. They preached that government help was a weakness, all while cashing government checks to build railroads, farms, and their fortunes. The West was the most subsidized project in American history, government subsidized, but the benefits went almost entirely to white settlers. Coincidence? Every time America tried to help black citizens, the oligarchs screamed, socialism and redistribution of wealth. They call it freedom when they took everything, and tyranny when anyone else got a chance. Does that sound familiar? It's the same stuff they're saying today. This is how the Confederacy became a corporation, how the plantation became Wall Street, and how the pulpit became propaganda. They wrapped oligarchy in the flag and called it patriotism. They rebranded cruelty as tradition. They convinced Americans to defend the very system that exploits them. And through it all, they told us, this is America. But it never was. Not even for a second. So here's the truth they don't want you to remember. America was never perfect, but it was never theirs. The founders wrote a constitution designed to evolve, not to freeze in 1776, but to improve with every generation. They gave us amendments because they believed progress was patriotic. They gave us freedom of the press, freedom of speech, because they believed truth would always outlast the lies. They gave us the right to worship or not, because they believed conscience was sacred. The Treaty of Tripoli said it clearly. Again, the government of the United States is not, in any sense, founded on the Christian religion, because this was never supposed to be a theocracy. It was supposed to be a philosophic republic. America's greatness was never about blood or race or creed. It was about becoming a place where you could think freely, speak freely, and build freely. A place where no single dogma, religious, racial, or economic, could rule the human mind. That's what the AICOs fear most. A people who can think, a nation that remembers who it's supposed to be. And this is the awakening. We've never truly lived in America. Not the one they imagined, but the spirit of that original experiment of reason, unity, progress. It's rising again. Every person who wakes up to this truth becomes part of the correction, part of the completion of the American story. We're here to finish it. That's what makes it MAFO. That's what MAFO means. Make America America for once. Make her whole, make her honest, make her free. For real this time. So follow me. Become a new patriot. And together, we'll make America what it was always meant to be. Not a white nation, not a Christian nation, but a human one, a thinking one, a free one.